Welcome back to the Adventure Paradox podcast. Very excited to chat with a fellow traveler, hiker, adventurer. This gal has been through a lot. She spends some of her time in Bozeman, some in California, as I understand it. Joe, I'll give you a formal introduction in just a moment, but first I want to welcome you to the show. And for our listeners, can you tell us where in the world are you zooming in from today, please?
Right now, I'm in Southern California, a glorious place for a hiker to live. You can hike in the mountains right behind me, or you can hike on the beach right in front of us.
I know it well. I have a lot of family in SoCal and was born there, and wonderful to chat with a fellow Californian. So, for those who don't know, Joe Giese is the author of several books, including the recent bestseller, Never Sit If You Can Dance. In 2024, she was honored as a local hero by Oboes. Did I say that right? The hiking brand?
You did the hiking boot company. I was surprised and startled and so happy.
Okay, I can't wait to talk about that. But yes, by Oboes, the hiking shoe company. She is also an award-winning radio journalist. As a special correspondent, she was part of the Peabody Award winning team at Marketplace. Very cool. And I know you have another book coming out, but first, can you just give us a snapshot of that first book and what it was like for you to become an author initially?
Well, we have to backtrack a long way. I lived in New York a long time. I was on television on NBC Television News, and Doubleday approached me about writing a book um, similar to the work I was doing on television, which at that point was a weekly segment about food and nutrition. This was before there was a Food Network. So this is actually that my current book that's coming out now, You'll Never Walk Alone, is actually like my fifth book.
Wow. So, again, back to my question, becoming an author initially, what was that experience like for you?
Well, let me tell you, back then, decades ago, it was totally different than it is today. Back then, it was Doubleday. Nelson Doubleday hosted a wonderful um, dinner party for me with all the big honchos from the New York Times. It was in the Doubleday dining room. Um, it was just it was just a different experience. And then a book after that one, which was published by Golden Books, the adult division. I got this huge advance. I needed to work with a photographer on that book. It was called A Woman's Path, and I was interviewing women across the country who had succeeded in male-dominated career fields.
Mm.
And I got a big advance. I needed it because I'm traveling, my photographer's traveling. But those kinds of things just don't happen these days. These days, it's a different environment, and the publishing business has been narrowed down to a few big hot shots, and it's just a different environment.
Yeah, it's amazing how things line up, right time, right place, right? And we can look back and then also be present to how things are today, right? And then going forward, the Oboes Award, what was that experience like?
Oh wait, I got to show you my photos here. Um,
I also have Oboes hiking shoes. That's why I
do
wanted to
you
make sure I
really?
got the
Do you
yep.
really? Because many people, when I tell them these are my favorite red oboes, red is obviously my favorite color. Um, when uh, oboes put out a, I don't know, some kind of announcement, and the physical therapist who worked with me so that I could learn to walk again, put in my name as a potential winner of this local hero award, and they honored me with it. And so I wrote to Paige, my contact there, and I said, why me? And she said, because of your determination and grit, and that GRIT in big capital letters, because I had a freak accident at home, had a botched surgery, and had lost my left Achilles. And most people who do not have an Achilles are not walking.
Mm. I feel like we need to hear a little bit more there. Like, what was this accident that then you're having to learn to
Okay.
rewalk, and also you don't have an Achilles, and most people are not going to be able to walk again as a result? Like, can you tell us a little bit more? Because I heard you say learning to walk again. I was like, what? So
Right.
can you tell
So
us more about the event?
that's what this book, You'll Never Walk Alone, is really about, is about all the people who eventually came in. Okay, so here's the story. I'm upstairs in my office, right where I am now, on the second floor of my house in Southern California. It's November 2018, and the doorbell's ringing downstairs. My friend is down there. I don't want her to get wet. It never rains in the end of November here. So I leave my office, I race down the stairs, and I miss the bottom two steps. And I go flying horizontally across the entry hallway. And my husband hears me. He comes running. I say, let Lana in. She's getting wet out there. And so Lana and my husband get me to urgent care in our area. And the doctor there gets all white faced and she goes, they do an x-ray, immediately. And she goes, I hate to tell you this, but you have a complete rupture of your left Achilles. And so I then pull out my cell phone. We had a relationship with an orthopedist here in Southern California. He had done a little work on my left knee at one point. And he said, sure, come in tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. So we feel better. We have a place to go, someone to see. In the meantime, my husband had rented a wheelchair from urgent care. I'm not walking. We go in to see this doctor the next morning, and he doesn't really even look at the x-ray his place just took. He doesn't actually even look at my ankle down there. He just says, I can do this. I did Achilles repair 20, 30 years ago. I can do this. Now, Kat, if you have an injury and you go see some doctor and he says, oh, Kat, I can do this. I did this 20, 30 years ago. Now you are smart enough that even if you can't walk, even if you're in a wheelchair, I bet you would say, thank you very much, Fred. I call the doctor Fred in the book because I didn't want to have a lawsuit. Thank you very much, Fred. But you know what? I think we're going to go find someone who has done this Achilles surgery 20, 30 minutes ago.
Yeah.
And instead, because I'm in a wheelchair and we're frightened to death, um, he goes ahead with the surgery. We let him go ahead with the surgery. And when all the bandages and everything are taken off, 14 days later, it turns out that the whole surgical area down where my ankle is had become necrotic. Now, I don't even know as a writer if I even knew the word necrosis back then, but it means dead. My whole ankle area had died. Now, when you have a part of your body that it has died, it's very scary because that can turn into sepsis and you can end up dead from that.
Hmm.
And so, um, so 8 surgeries later, I finally got, because we had to deal with um, the necrosis of the wound. And then when he went in, the trauma wound surgeon went in to deal with the wound, getting all the scar around the wound away. He said, and that's when we will reattach the Achilles. But at that time, because then the orthopedist was going to be in on that surgery. But at that time, what they found out, and the surgery is supposed to last 4 or 5 hours, maybe, an hour later in the recovery area, the trauma wound surgeon comes in and he says, there was nothing to reattach. Your Achilles had the strongest tendon in your body had curled in onto itself like a little fetal awful thing, and it was a slimy mess, and it had died. So now, not only do I have a necrotic wound, I have a dead left Achilles. I have no left Achilles. And when you hear like sports people, often basketball players, because they're doing all this jumping and throwing and everything, when you hear that they have an Achilles problem, they usually have an Achilles tear. But they might have a rupture, but they get it repaired. They at least have an Achilles. I did not have an Achilles. Finally, the doctor who botched the surgery, because I had all these other surgeries afterwards, he sent me an email. And of course, he never took blame for botching the surgery. He said, you might try this place. And the place he sent me to was called CORE, the Center of Restorative um, Exercise in Northridge. And I'm being driven there once because at this point I can't drive either. And I think, okay, I'll go here once. Driving from LA to Northridge is, about as far as asking someone to drive from LA to London. It takes forever. But I thought I'll go once. And the director of the center there, Taylor, who has multiple doctorates in sports medicine, said it's a center primarily for people with spinal cord injuries, people who are not walking and are learning to walk again. But they have a neurological problem and an orthopedic problem. I only had an orthopedic problem. And Taylor had never worked with anyone without an Achilles, but he said, I can put all of my education to work right here. And he directed himself to helping me learn to walk again. It took us 2.5 years. Who said I'll go there once, went there for 2.5 years, sometimes 2 times a week, usually 3 times a week. And then he added all these other modalities. He added on a medical acupuncturist to my recovery team. He added on a podiatrist. He added on shockwave treatment. You name it. He said, this is your recovery program, and you're the CEO of your recovery now. And at one point, I complained to him, and I said, "Yeah, but Taylor, the acupuncture place that's in Beverly Hills. Do you know how far away that is?" And he said, "This is your job now." And at the end of 2.5 years, I was pretty much walking again. And recently, many people have been calling me a medical miracle. And so I asked a doctor I was seeing a couple months ago, I said, he's not a doctor who was involved in my Achilles situation at all. He didn't even know about it. And I told him about it, and I said, is it fair or is it hyperbole that people are saying I'm a medical miracle? And he thought about it for a while. He didn't come to a snap judgment. And he said, yes. He said, you're a medical outlier. He said, most people without an Achilles would be doing well to walk around their living room. So I think it's fair to say that you're a medical miracle.
Wow, I love this story so much, and I'm blown away. And I think like one of the biggest things I hear is the magic of finding the right people who lead you back to yourself and your own healing. And his words of, "You're the CEO. I'm going to do everything I can to meet you there, but like you're in charge of your healing now." And I know you speak a lot on why you didn't sue the doctor, and I want to touch on that story because it sounds like a story of forgiveness, perhaps, but I want to
Oh,
hear in your
no,
words
no,
how you
no,
think about it.
no, not forgiveness, not forgiveness. He never should have. Many people in this journey said, well, you're going to sue the guy, right? Um, and um, And I said, no, not a chance. My husband happens to be a lawyer, the kind of hotshot big deal lawyer that tries cases at the Supreme Court. But he wasn't, interested in suing the doctor either. And then when I read Atul Gawan's book about the complications of surgery, he says every surgery is risky. Any surgery is risky. So that my surgery didn't work out right, you could say wasn't the doctor's fault. So most of the time, when you have a medical lawsuit, um, the patient is just not going to win because all of the other um, um, of his colleagues, some of them will come to his defense. So,
Yeah.
but Kat, I want to tell you a fun part of my adventure because the title of your show is Adventure Paradox. And I thought, I wonder if I am the youngest adventurer she's ever had on because I grew up in Seattle, Washington, on the edge of Lake Washington Boulevard. And right next to where we were is Seward Park, one of the most beautiful parks in the world. It's was designed by the Olmsted brothers who designed Central Park in New York City. Glorious. I didn't know that when I was 5 years old. All I knew is I would put on my pinafore that my mother had made, lace everywhere. She sewed them by herself, ruffles. And I would go from our house just a block or so over to Seward Park, and I'd go by myself because there weren't really any other children my age in the neighborhood. I'd take a couple pumps on the swing, and then I'd walk on the soft bark path, not in my elbows then, in my Mary Janes, up to in the old growth forest where the trees were 2 and 3 stories high, a cathedral of a green forest. And then I'd walk back home. And a retired cop who happened to live next door to us said to my mom, you might consider that's not such a good thing for her to do by herself. Now, this was decades and decades ago. And my mom said, yeah, but she likes it. So I think you could say I started out as an adventurer at probably 5 years old.
I love that. And
Right,
I love, that you called out the title because one of the things about being an adventurer is the paradox. So what I hear there is the paradox of being a 5-year-old, right? And having the cop next door saying, ooh, and your mom, again, being a steward for you and your adventure and saying, yeah, she likes it. And look at her
right,
go, that heart, right? I
right.
love that heart. And I love that someone nominated you. It sounds like your physical therapist, I think you said, for oboes. And I love that 4-letter word, grit, right?
Right.
Because when you really embark on the adventure, you are going to find your grit or not, your moment of, ooh, maybe not. I'd love to hear you touch on this question that you shared with me. What's the difference between someone who succumbs to their grim diagnosis and others who don't?
Well, I think that is the quintessential question that my current book poses. And I'll just as to backtrack just a little bit. I finally met someone or talked to someone who did not have an Achilles either. He had a similar accident to what I had. He was riding his bicycle though, used to ride 50 miles a day, had an accident, ruptured his Achilles, had an infection, like I had an infection. And then at a certain point, he after 3 surgeries in his case, he just threw in the towel. He was not going to do all that it was going to require. In my case, the podiatrist, everything. I did everything. He just and he was not going to walk again. So, what is the difference between someone like that man who happened to live in Florida, who succumbs to their grim diagnosis, and someone like myself who just goes, no? I'll tell you another story in this area. I was seeing a physical therapist, this physical therapist was someone who I kind of knew. I'd had her over to the house for lunch. Unfortunately, our mothers died about the same time. We commiserated over that. I enjoyed hearing the stories about her father dating again when he was in his 70s. Um, so I thought we were kind of friends. So one day I go into her physical therapy facility there. This happens to be in Montana. And she asked me to walk across the room. Everybody's always asking me to walk across the room while they look at me, see how I'm doing. And she says, I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, but you have to realize you're going to be compromised for the rest of your life. Now, I never spoke to that person again
Mm,
because at that point, all I had was hope.
mm,
Hope that if I kept doing everything I was doing, step after step, no pun intended, that I could be walking and hiking to my favorite waterfalls again. And
mm,
there, and there she is, this, excuse me, this physical therapist saying you have to accept you're going to be compromised for the rest of your life. I went, no, no, no. And then, and then just ironically, the day when after Oboes honored me, and we are doing a photo shoot at a favorite waterfall outside of Bozeman because I'm a waterfall junkie. One of the thoughts, and when I have my poles in the air and I'm down there at the splashdown, and the photos are pretty wonderful. My thought in my head was, if only she could see me now, the one
mm.
who said you're going to be compromised forever. So,
Wow. You know, what I'm hearing in that is sometimes it's not the ones you add in, it's the subtraction, right? Where you realize, you know what? You're not part of my life or recovery. It's that CEO move. Like, we are not keeping you in this story with that belief because it is not supporting us in our mission because I believe I'm going to walk again, right? And I'm going to move forward. And that thinking and that judgment is not helpful, is not serving, and is not a part of this party, right? And I think so often we live in a world where we give others so much more power, especially surgeons, right? Especially the medical community. My father is a retired orthopod, actually, so I've heard a lot of the risk, the surgeon side of it, those things, and I've also been on the patient side. And one of the things I remember my dad saying after my ACL surgery, and they have a certain, you'll probably be back to it in 6 months, da 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 da, and 2 years later I'm still in pain skiing, and I remember him saying to me, "It's not in your surgeon's time." It's not in your physical therapist's time. It's in God's time. Like there's really a lot of this is really kind of that magic of life, and some really make it and some don't, and you step into this calling that you came here for. Like that's what I hear. And this new book, I can't wait for it. I know it's coming out February 10th. And I think it's such an important message for people to take their power back and really recognize who's on my team and what's the mission here? Like, where am I going? Because you were very clear. You were like, all right, these things have happened. This is where I'm going, right? And I'm not hiking alone, but some people might not be on the trail with me. Like, I think that's so important.
well, I think you're right about that. I think when you're given a grim diagnosis like I was given, you don't have to accept it. You can go beyond that
Mm-hmm.
diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but one of the things we haven't talked about yet, which is my total passion, because I'm at the same time that I was hiking by myself in Seward Park as a 5-year-old, my parents had taken me to see a waterfall outside of Seattle, Snoqualmie Falls.
Mm.
And on the spot, at that moment, in my DNA, I became a waterfall junkie. So mostly what I do is I hike to waterfalls, wherever they are, all over the world. And one of my favorite adventures was doing helicopter hiking to um, to a wonderful area in New Zealand.
Mm. After your injury?
No, no, this was before the injury.
Okay, wow. I I'm also a big hiking junkie, of course. So I love these stories, and I actually grew up in Wenatchee, so I know
Oh,
Squamish
okay.
Falls. Um, and I just love, there's something so powerful about that moving water and being really close to that. And I just had a download that, like, you're going to lead people on adventure trips. Like, I can see this for you. You know, we had a really, whether or not you choose to follow through, it could be in the spirit realm, but we had a really powerful guest who had a terrible car accident and lost the use of her legs. And through training, a very similar story of resilience, she ended up hiking Machu Picchu. And it was just like she just committed to it, knew she was going to do it. And there were so many parts of that where she met the right people along the way because there were just certain things that she couldn't anticipate she would need help with, and the way it all came together. And I'm so inspired by you. Like, I just see you taking people with you to, and you get to choose who you take, these magical waterfalls, and sharing the way you see the world, which is so important. Now, your new book, You'll Never Walk Alone, kind of fits into this vision I have for you, which of course you decide, you're the CEO, what your vision is. But can you please tell us the subtitle? Because I know there's a really strong subtitle on there.
Right. It's a hiker's memoir of adventure, tragedy, and defying the odds. And of course, the adventure is, doing helicopter hiking in New Zealand. And the tragedy, of course, is losing my left Achilles and maybe probably not being able to walk again. And then defying the odds is I am walking. But let me just share with you a little story because I am doing really well now, but I am walking at half the speed I used to walk at because I can't push off on my left foot.
Mm.
And so when I was telling Taylor, the physical therapist who worked with me for 2.5 years and is the reason I'm walking today, I said, but Taylor, everybody's whizzing by me. I'm going half speed. And he says, to compare is to despair.
Oh,
Stop it.
so
Stop it.
good.
Stop it. Stop it. So you just have to. Oh, I know the story I was thinking about. I was meeting a woman writer for coffee. This was maybe a month or so ago. I had never met her before, but I liked her on the phone. She was new to this area. I said, yeah, sure, let's meet for coffee. She was sitting at the table. She already had her cup of coffee. I went to get mine. I was coming back to the table. I was feeling very cheerful and buoyant. Get to meet somebody new. This will be fun. And as I sit down, and she doesn't know anything about my story. And as I sit down, she says, you're limping. Now, for me, that was like a dart to the heart because I didn't feel like I was limping anymore. I knew I was walking slower, but limping. And then I came home and I told my husband, I told him what she'd said, and he said, well, you do plod. So even though I feel I'm walking, I'm using my oboes again. I've got my new tennis shoes with the cushy socks inside. Um, I I am walking at half the speed I used to walk, and just it was like during this during this journey, someone said to me, "Well, do you consider yourself an ex-hiker or an ex-walker?" And I went, no, 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 that's not me. I've been, hiking since I was 5 years old in Seattle. No, but it requires some energy, and it also requires, as the title of my book says, "You'll Never Walk Alone," a whole team of people um, coming in to help me.
Mm.
And I could not have done it by myself. Oh God, no. Um, it was a whole team of people.
So powerful. And I love that to compare is to despair, right?
Right.
I've also heard comparison is the thief of joy, right?
Right.
But like any way you slice it, to have, and I really believe these angels on earth show up with skin on for us at the right time in the right game to like help us. And I've heard this other quote, a friend is a person who knows the song in your heart and can sing it back to you when you have forgotten, right? And
Mm.
that's what I hear all of these hikers along your way, your physical therapist, right? The CEO who reflected to you, you are the CEO, right?
But Kat, this is a song. You'll Never Walk Alone. It's an Oscar and Hammerstein song, and it's wonderful. Um, it's beautiful.
Oh,
And I use some of those lyrics in the very foreword of the book, where it says, though your dreams may be tossed and blown, walk on with hope in your heart, and you'll never walk alone. You'll never walk alone.
amen. Hats off to you, my friend. Sorry, little thing on here. I know our listeners are going to want to follow along. They're going to want to buy your book. We will put all of these links into the show notes. But in case somebody is out on a hike of their own and this podcast is going to roll into the next podcast, do you have a website? Do you have some favorite social media handles you'd like to share so they can follow along?
Sure, sure. Probably, I have a nice website. It's just my name, J-O, Giese, Giese. And I'm also on Instagram, which I love doing. I think that's fun. And that's just my name spelled backwards, Giese, Giese, Joe. I'd be happy for people to reach out. And the book will be available starting February 10th.
Excellent. Thank you so much for all of your wisdom, all of your stories, the incredible grit of your presence, and just keeping that hope, keeping that vision, sharing that with me and with all of our listeners today. I truly am so blessed to be in your presence, Joe.
Well, thank you for the opportunity, Kat. I appreciate what you do.
Awesome. Until we meet again, thank you so much, listeners. If you loved this, please subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with a friend because we never hike or listen alone. Till next time.